Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Huh? So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Madness Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network with original programming and additional comic-related content.
Hey, we want to shout out to our sponsors, Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you are a fan of comic books, if you're a fan of comic book conventions, and if you like meeting comic book creators and getting comics and comic-related stuff, then you need to make your plans to attend Daytona Beach Comic Con. This year's show is September 9th and 10th. Silverline will be there, so you should make your plans to be there too. We'll see you there. If you like comics and find yourself in the Orlando, Florida area, doesn't everyone come to Orlando at some point in time to see the House of Mouse? But when you're here, you need to make it a point to visit Coliseum of Comics, especially the one on East Colonial Drive. They carry Silverline comics, even a limited edition Coliseum of Comics version of our comics. So, when you go, be sure to ask for Silverline Comics and tell them we sent you. OCD stands for Orlando Collector Deviants. OCD, Steve and Trish, they're a family of geeks who promote geek things, particularly those around the Orlando, Florida area. They're big supporters of Silverline, and we think you should be supporters of theirs too. Go give them some love. If you are an independent comic book maker and you need to get your independent comics made, you need to look no further than Kablam Digital Printing. They print our books, and they do a bang-up job. They're not only trusted by Silverline, but many, many independent comic book makers. Head on over to kablam.com and see for yourself just how easy it is to have your comic printed by them. And tell them Silverline sent you.
Hi, this is Tim TK, host of That Silverline Show on Tuesday. Join us at 11 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Pacific every Tuesday night as we discuss pop culture and the joys of making comics.
Hi, I'm Barb Kilber, co-host of Silverline's Wednesday Wham. Join us each Wednesday nights as we discuss comics, literature, movies, and anything else that may catch our attention.
I'm Roland Mann, and I host Silverline's Silver Sunday. Join me every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern as we make mine Silverline. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Silver Sunday.
5 minutes of that. Jeez. You guys with your self-promotion and you young whippersnappers with the computers and the talking with the headphones.
Yeah, so that's what tonight's going to be like. So it's April 10th, the year of 2020. So
it's April what? Oh,
April the 10th. It's not quite tax day. It's not quite the day that the tax man is going to take all your money away. So let's put Jerry over here in the middle right there. So we're going to have a fun night tonight. We are going to ask Jerry all kinds of questions, and he assures me via email that he has none of the answers that we're going to the questions that we're going to ask. But we're going to ask him anyway. So I'm Roland, and I'm here with Curtis. Curtis, say hi.
Hi. Curtis, hey to Curtis.
Hello. And also with Thomas Florimonte Jr. Tommy, say hi.
How do you do? Nice to meet you too.
Have you ever met Jerry?
No, I have not.
Oh, well, Tommy, meet Jerry. Jerry, meet Tommy.
How's it do? Virtual handshake.
Yeah.
And, of course, our regular
Roberta. Hi, Roberta.
Roberta, say hi.
He forgot your name? Don't you live in Florida now or something?
No, Roberta didn't live in Florida. And our special guest tonight, you guys know him from doing comics for a long time.
Is probably I'm gonna go out on a limb and say probably the most popular thing it was probably Batman Son of the Demon. But Jerry's done a lot of stuff. He did a lot of Marvel 2-in-1, did some work for Marvel, did work in Hollywood, which we'll ask you about that. And now he's kind of a Western. Is it a Western painter? Is that what you call yourself? Is that? I mean, you're a painter, but
I do historical art.
Historical art. Okay, I like that. But when people ask me, and I say, yeah, he kind of does historical paintings or Western paintings now, and they're like, huh? And I'm like, you know who Frederick Remington is? And they're like, no. And I was always going to kind of like compare you to Frederick Remington. It's like he's kind of like Frederick Remington, but they're always like,
no, I wish.
Oh, I like your stuff. Of course, you already know that.
Well, comparing me to the best, that's okay.
So I got to ask you, Jerry, is this your first live stream? I know you've done interviews all over the place, but is this your first?
I've been in hiding. You guys have dragged me out of this. You said, if you're my friend, you'll come on my website podcast. And I go, yeah, okay.
No, actually, I think you said no to all of those, but I said, Roberta really wants you to show up. And then you said,
that was it. Okay. Dropping the name.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. So
I think Roland agreed not to keep begging you if you actually came on this one time. So we'll leave you alone at this point.
Well, after the one time, he won't want to be begging you.
Yeah, Jerry has already asked me if we have one of those 5-second delay buttons.
Oh no.
Oh.
Well, I've lived alone for quite a while now, and I kind of when I'm talking to people in my family, I sometimes slip into the lingo that isn't polite for public. So no, I'm good.
Okay.
I'll manage. Virtually.
Of course you will. So so the first time I met Jerry, now I don't know who Jerry was, but the first time I met Jerry was when he came into the Malibu offices around, and I don't know what year that was, probably 92.
Oh gosh. Yeah, maybe around there.
Yeah, because I'd already been there for a while, and
I'm trying to think. My Beowulf graphic novel came out in 94 thereabouts, and shortly thereafter, I got that thing at the San Diego Comic Con, and I think I was working in Malibu then, wasn't I? I don't know.
Mm-hmm. You were there by then.
I probably have it written down someplace.
Well, I was gonna say, so Malibu ceased to be in 96 when Marvel kind of fired everybody. The Marvel purchase was in 94.
Okay.
So were you there before Marvel purchased Malibu?
Well, the Kirby Award there was 80. When was it? 84?
I remember that.
85?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was the Beowulf was published in 84, and it was just a couple of years after that. I think. I don't know. I'm too old to remember these things. You should remember it, Roland. Come on. Curtis, you're the youngest one in the group. Come on. When was it?
What year was it?
It had to be 93, maybe the beginning.
How old were you? Do you remember when I started working over there?
I was 15 or 16. And were you at, I can't remember, were you at the Westlake Village office first? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that
one of the first conversations I had with Curtis, I believe you were asking my opinion on which martial arts you should take, right? And
yeah.
I don't know if were you already into Kung Fu there? Or
No. I wanted to go straight to the weapons. I said, I want to learn how to use a sword. And you just looked at me and you said, Curtis, they're not going to teach you how to use a weapon unless you know how to move your body.
There is that too.
You changed your life, man.
Yeah.
But well, I was into jiu-jitsu for quite a few years, and
It's good advice.
the only sword that goes with that is if I studied kendo for about for less than a year, and it's the Japanese styles. I just moved from one to the next, but kendo is quite a bit different from kung fu swordplay.
Yeah, definitely. Roland, we'll start off with the bang. Roland said it was okay I could say this live, so.
Oh yeah, please do.
So Jerry was such a huge influence on so many of us there, and he helped me with art and explained all and kind of put me on the right path. And he started a figure drawing workshop in the office. It was actually in the lunch area. And so Roland said, it's okay, I can say that. So not only do I owe Jerry a lot because he helped me learn how to do art, but he helped me see my first nude woman. So that's
what?
You had to bring that up. Yes, I brought in a model. Yeah, we put a model once a week or whatever it was for I don't know how long until somebody came by and said, "You can't be doing this here."
Art, man.
Curtis was like 13 years old. What are you doing?
I just remember I was staring at the ground for like the first 12 poses.
You're right. You were staring at the ground. I don't believe that.
Well, it was just something I had done when I was at Imagineering, and one of the guys over there, he brought in a model. Sometimes they were in costumes, sometimes they weren't, and it was just one of those things like artists after work and communing and learning and teaching each other
and getting naked. Apparently,
you missed that part of being an artist, Tommy.
I didn't. Yeah, I did. I should have took more art classes. I didn't know about that part of it.
Every art school class.
Oh, doggone it! I'm going to sign up now. Let me see if I can take a class.
There you go.
I heard somebody. I don't remember who it was. I heard someone talk about it. They said that they every time they had a figure drawing class, they said, you never knew. I guess they got around a stage, and they said you never knew where you would be in relation to the model. but this person said it never failed. The dude would come in anytime it was a dude. He'd come in and he'd turn around and he'd face me, wide legs spread wide open, and he'd be like, "Oh, can I move to the other side, please?"
Guess what I'm going to draw? Okay.
Okay, this is a PG podcast, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, Roberta.
It's okay. I went to art school,
Yes, I know. That's why I asked.
I know you know.
Everybody knows how Roberta started there at Malibu, right?
Yep. You can tell it.
Yeah, tell it. Tell it.
I've already said.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. It was all due to my moving into the neighborhood, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Moved in the middle of the night. It was just me and my U-Haul van. Pulled into the house I was renting at the time, and my truck broke down right there in the driveway.
Mm-hmm.
And it was late, lights were out, and I saw a light across the street, kitty corner to my house, and I walked over there and I said, "Could I please use your phone?" And Roberta and her mom were there.
Oh, really? You never told us this story, Roberta.
I didn't tell you this story because it's interesting.
And Roberta and her mom were there, and I found out that she was going to art classes at, what was it, North?
Yeah, Northridge.
Where was it? Northridge?
Yeah.
Northridge, that's right. And that's when I started over at Malibu, and they were looking for computer colorists. That's when Roberta was the first one who sprang to mind. How do I pay this family back for helping me in the middle of the night with my broke down truck? At least letting me use the phone. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you've kept at it a long time. Yeah. Ever since we first met, almost.
I know it. And it was really perfect because, some of the classmates that I have were buzzing about that job too. And I was like, you know what, this is perfect. This is exactly what we need, the impetus to, get in.
By the way, am I yelling here? Can you hear me yelling through? Okay.
We
Sounds good.
This was one of those things, maybe it's a family trait, because we would get off the phone with my dad and we would talk about it afterwards. He always sounds, when he's talking on the phone, he sounds like he's yelling into two tin cans connected by a string. So that's why I think I'm falling back on this. This weird technology where you actually just talk at a screen. Good Lord.
Yeah. And we've even got now we've got the Dick Tracy watches.
Dick Tracy watches. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait till they tell you have to implant them.
Right. Or put them. I'm gonna put them in the back of my skull. Right. Yeah.
Plenty of room, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In my head there is. Yeah. So, all right. So, Jerry, what kind of training, learning did you have as an artist? Take us back to the young days of.
Oh, Jerry. Good Lord.
Oh, wait a minute. Think about that question. Curtis, you just reminded me. I forgot to mention in my excitement to get us started tonight. I forgot to mention our sponsors.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
Shout out to Daytona Beach Comic Con. If you like comics and you like comic books and you want to meet comic creators, make your plans. September 10th and 11th, Daytona Beach Comic Con. There's going to be a whole bunch of Silverliners there. I think my last count was 10 of us. There'll be 10 of us there and a whole bunch of other people who make comics as well. So come on out and make your plans. Daytona Beach Comic Con. Also to Orlando OCD, Orlando Collector Deviants. In fact, Wubba and I were on on Thursday. It was the first Wubba sighting in months, and Wubba assures me that he's going to be returning to us soon. So hopefully that'll be sooner rather than later. And of course, big thank yous to Coliseum of Comics. They hosted me and Tommy and Haley on Wednesday when we did.
Yeah, we had a good time.
We had a fun time. We had a signing there for our new book, Rejects. And Coliseum of Comics, East Colonial Drive in Orlando. If you are in Orlando and you want Silverline comics, go there because they got a bunch of them. In fact, I took a picture. They got a rack that has a whole bunch of Silverline comics, and that was really very cool to see.
Can you share the picture?
No, because it's on the phone that I had, and I don't know how to do that.
You don't know how to do that.
I don't know how to do that quickly.
He doesn't know how to do that.
And of course, to Kablam, who is a printer, and they print all of our stuff. If you have an independent comic and you want your comic printed, you should reach out to Kablam. Okay. Thank you for reminding me of that, Curtis. Mm-hmm. Okay, Jerry, back to the question.
He's still like the office go-to guy.
Perfected it.
Very much so.
Good job, Chris. Tommy, what is it you're doing there? You're working on a job right now, I can tell.
Yeah. Oh, Tommy, you want to share?
Sure, I'll throw it up.
Lotus drinker, or what do you?
Yeah, sure. I'll throw it up on the screen.
Yeah.
Give me a second. Let me get it worked up.
So one of the things we usually try to do here, Jerry, is Roberta will often share her colors. Curtis will share his art. Tommy will ink, and we'll pop that up on the screen so that those who are watching us visually can watch one of these guys do some awesome work while we chat. So we'll get.
I've actually watched a couple of your videos after you talked me into this thing, just to see what I was getting into.
You watched the one with Tom Mason, didn't you?
Yeah, I watched that one.
I knew you did because of the Archie, not Archie. Oh crap, Archie.
Andy Griffith.
Andy Griffith. Thank you, Andy Griffith comment.
Oh, yeah, I made that Andy Griffith line.
So I'm like, okay, you watch that one.
No, Tom always articulate. I wish I could be as articulate, speaking extemporaneously here.
I am telling you, I still say today, and we talk about this a little bit offline. Tom is probably a person with the sharpest wit I think I have ever met. He's so quick with his now often they're barbed when they come at you, but he is so quick with it that we used to accuse him in our editorial meetings. We used to accuse him of going home and writing them down at night and then just memorizing them for the next day. Yeah.
Well, yeah. You, him, you editors, you talk for a living basically, and I come here and I spent 40 to 50 years staring at my computer alone in a room, and I can barely put a sentence together. So give me some stuff.
Well,
That's what happened to me when Roland approached me for this stream. I'm like, I don't talk. I don't.
It's that's the way I feel usually. It's a practice skill, and I had no practice.
Well, and it's funny too because we were kind of talking about this the other day. If you look at some of the very first streams Roberta was on, she didn't say very much at all. No, I mean we still do sometimes. Roberta, what do you think? We specifically come out and ask her, right? And but at the very first streams, she's just like, I want to draw. Put me on, as if that would get her out of answering questions.
Well, I've known a number of artists who are very good at public speaking. I was just never one of them.
Yeah,
cool stuff.
Yeah.
Now, you do the pencils too?
No, this is Pete Clinton, which usually is on our Sunday show, but I think he's probably still honeymooning or something. I don't know why he's not on. I think we saw him earlier today on the in our big chat room thing, and so I think he's probably fallen asleep. He's from the
From
UK,
UK.
so he's probably messed up his alarm clock and didn't set it. So. But yeah, this is the fourth issue of Trump's the Pete's pencils, and I'm trying to ink it.
Very cool.
Yeah, it's some good looking stuff.
Yeah.
You find out some of us old guys from the 70s use cool way too often. It's just another thing I slip into on occasion when I'm talking. Cool.
Yeah. I think that held over into the 80s too.
Yeah.
We use that a lot.
At least I don't use Nito in it much anymore. So.
Or what about Far Out?
Far Out? No, I was never into drugs, sadly, or not.
What? So you had to be into drugs to say Far Out?
Kind of.
Was it?
Back
oh,
in
really?
The 60s,
okay.
Back in the 60s? Well, no, I'm joking.
All right, so back to the question, Jerry. How do you attribute any of your artistic training? Did you go to school? Did you, I know you have some military service. Did you do anything in the military? What was your training? What was your background?
My mom.
Your mom? Okay.
Yeah. When I was 1 and 2 years old, I would be on her lap when she'd have the pencil in my hand saying, eyes, nose, mouth, and we'd be drawing happy faces together. And so that was the start of it.
Wow.
And, no, she did paint by numbers, and I was always intrigued. She was doing Disney paint by numbers. And so I was kind of like steered toward that direction, just fascinated by it until I got my first comic books when I was maybe 10 years old or something. And then I just sunk myself into the comics. Got to trading with the kids on the block because God knows 12 cents was a little too much to spend back then in my neighborhood. And yeah, so then I was always a bit of an introvert. So I wasn't into sports. I was kind of a chubby kid. And so I would lay on my bedroom floor. My father used to throw me out of the house or tell me to get out and play. And I would just be in my room, laying on the floor, copying the pictures out of the comic books. And
nothing wrong with that.
Well, I've heard the story from other people. That's pretty much what it is. You love it. You start it when you're little, and you just keep plugging it. And it's the frustration of not being able to draw like the guys in the comic books that keeps you wanting to evolve and make your stuff better. So that's my young life. And going from one comic book artist to the next as your inspiration, finding Jack Kirby, and then moving from Jack Kirby to John Buscema. And I fell in love with Buscema's work, and I kind of tried to be him for many years, influenced by a lot of others. The great thing about comics back then was Marvel Comics. There may have been a house style, but there were such disparate talents, so many different styles in house. You go from Kirby to Gene Colan, and it's like they're miles apart. And Gil Kane and all these guys came from someplace else and brought their own talent, and that's what I think so many of the young people miss today. They're all trying to look like the present day comics, or not all, but so many of them.
Right.
And I think it hurts the company. It's what the company aims at. When I finally started talking to people at the companies, I got out of the service in '76, and for 4 years while I was in the military, I was renting a house off base for much of it, and I built myself a drawing table out of a giant sheet of particle board and 2x4s. I hammered it together with nails.
Wow.
And so I had this huge drawing table in the spare room. And every day I got off work, I was a policeman, so I was mostly, swing shift, midnight shift. And so mornings I would spend hunkered over that table and over the course of 4 years, I probably wrote 3 novels, and I drew this comic book character that I claim I invented. And it was like 90 some pages. And I thought, wow, this is going to get somebody's attention. And so I walked out the gates of the base for the last time in New Jersey, and I went to New York, and nobody wanted to see my comic book. It was just, and I was devastated. It's like I put my whole life into, and now I got to go find a job. So I don't know how old I was, 21. Oh, no, 22 or thereabouts. And you're walking Manhattan in the summer heat, dripping, with you carrying your portfolio, and from Port Authority to Madison Avenue and back. And at some point I stopped, and we'd had phone books in those days, phone booths, and I found one with a phone book in it, and I tore the pages out that were art directors, and not art directors, but like publishing companies. And I found out where Mad Magazine was, and I found out where, all these other companies were, and even advertising companies. And I walked in, and it was, do you have an appointment? Oh, do I need an appointment? And walked. I must have been walking for 10, 12 hours.
Good grief.
It was miserable, hot and sweaty. And I went home, and I collapsed, and I believe I cried that night, thinking my life was over. Right. My whole life I had geared towards comic books. This is all I ever wanted to do from the time I was 10 years old. And I got, I finally got out of the military, and I was ready for my shot, and nobody let me take a shot. So, I went home, and I was devastated. I couldn't move for about a day or two. And then I said, what are you going to do? Go drive a cab? So I opened my sketchbook up, and I started drawing on the floor again. Actually, it was my first wife. I was right out of the service. It was in New Jersey, so I was able to stay at her house and spend my days there on her carpet, drawing more and more characters and stuff. And eventually, I kept going back to Marvel. Actually, I found Frazetta's name in a phone book. And I called, and I didn't get a warm welcome there. I said, "This is the one guy I ever wanted to meet." And they didn't want to see me. I guess other people had found Frazetta too. I thought I was the only one. Back then, I knew nothing about Comic Cons. I was isolated in my little world, and I thought I was the only one trying to do comic books. So. Anyhow,
back in the day, that's how you found information. You got the phone book.
That's right. Got the phone book or something. Yeah, I had bought a couple fanzines or got them from a friend at some point, so I knew what fanzines were, but I had no idea what I was going up against. Yeah. So, and so that was it. And I kept drawing for about 6 months or so, or not so much, maybe 3 or 4 months, just redrawing stuff and creating a whole new portfolio. And I went back to Marvel maybe 3 more times. And finally, I made appointments, and the art director, Marie Severin. First, I think the first guy who looked at my portfolio was maybe Denny O'Neil.
Oh, wow.
At that point. And he gave me some advice and sent me home. And then Marie Severin was the art director there at Marvel. And she would meet me in the lobby, and she came out, and she had full-size Xeroxes of the pencils that she gave me to take home. And it was just like, this was a gift from the gods. Right. I had pencils from Gene Colan and Ross Andrew.
Andrew,
the Spider-Man stuff. And I had all these different pencilers, the Xeroxes of their pencils. And man, I said, I'm never going to be able to do this. These guys are great. Look at this. When you see large comic book drawings for the artwork for the first time, it's a revelation, because
it really is.
When you're growing up and you're trying to learn from looking at these little comic book pages, and then you see the original art full size for the first time as an adult, it's like, somebody slapped me in the head with a broom and said, "What are you doing here?" Yeah, so that was really eye-opening. And then so I went back, and Marie saw me once or twice more, and the last time she sat with me and looked over my new samples, and she said, there's this guy over in New Jersey. I don't know if you've ever heard of Dan Atkins. And I said, no, I hadn't. He was like a famous inker that I never really paid much attention to because I was always interested in the pencilers. I had never tried to ink anything. And so Dan Atkins, he told me, I made an appointment. I went over to his house, him and Jeanette, his wife, and his apartment he was staying at in New Jersey, right across the river from New York. And he let me stay on his couch for a week. He had a second drawing table set up in his living room, and I drew on his drawing table in the living room, and he would tell me I would never make it. he would say, Bingham, you're not going to make it. He says,
he was looking when you were going to get out. Is that what he was doing?
He says, look at John Buscema here. Look at Frank Frazetta. Back when Frank Frazetta was a teenager, he could sell his work today. Look how great he was, and when he was 19 and 20. And I say, yeah, I know, I can't. I'll never do it. Eventually, we got some samples drawn up that he thought were passable, and he took the bus with me over to Manhattan and took me in to Marvel and showed my stuff there. And Archie Goodwin, my hero, the best editor ever in the comic book industry, one of the best writers in comics ever. If you know the Warren stuff that he did and after, and the guy was a legend. I knew Archie Goodwin's name, and he gave me a trial story and 10-page story, and I went home and I drew the 10-page story and took it in, and he put it in a drawer, and he said, very nice, and we never saw it again. And then but he did give me another tryout, Kazar story, and my stuff. I look at the stuff I was doing then, and I say and I tell other people, I say, I wouldn't have hired me. This was terrible. This was awful. And but he gave me another tryout, and I went home. There's a Kazar story, and that went in a drawer. And about 5 years later, when I was working in the business regularly, trying to make a name for myself, trying to improve every day, they printed that story. Somebody else inked it, and they made a joke comic out of it.
Oh no!
Basically, the bad guys were wearing modern watches and eating. There's the people in the stadium stands were eating popcorn, and they just humiliated the hell out of me.
Oh man!
And it was excruciating when I got my monthly comic books in the mail from them, and I saw my book and I saw the cover. I said, "Wow, they printed this." And I opened it up and I said, "What the hell is this?"
Oh man!
Half the book was redrawn in the office. I take it, because the redrawing wasn't all that swift. But they did that to me a lot back then.
Really?
The Marvel editors, they didn't like my work for the most part, and so they would always hand my stuff over to somebody in the office or whatever artist had stopped by for the afternoon and told them to redraw a certain page. Half of the books that I did at Marvel, I would say, maybe not half, but I would say at least my first 5 years working there, I didn't recognize half the books when they came out because at least half the books were redrawn. And that was frustrating.
Yeah,
for a guy who's trying to build his own ego while he knows he's not very good at it, and trying to make a name for himself. And that was one of the reasons I taught myself to paint. I said, if I'm not going to do this, I'm going to be Frank Frazetta, and I'm going to be on book covers.
Yeah.
So, it was about 6 or 7 years after I had started at Marvel. I had also started working at DC. I should put that in. They had their tryout books when I was that age. They were the anthology series, the House of Mysteries, House of Secrets, our Army at War, those kind of things. And so I did several of those House of Mysteries or whatever they were. And I was doing that. And meanwhile, I was working. Dan had moved from New Jersey to a house in Reading, Pennsylvania, to be close to his buddy Jim Steranko. And so I got to meet Jim Steranko, who, you know, he's a god among comic book artists, and very nice guy. And yeah, that's why Dan moved to Reading, Pennsylvania. And he moved into it's a 3-story Victorian style house, and he took the top floor, the top couple floors, and then he said the bottom floor is vacant. And so I said, "You betcha!" And I moved in downstairs, moved downstairs with him, set up down there, and I still wasn't getting regular work at that time.
Yeah.
And so, and I had never picked up a quill pen, a dip pen. I had never even tried to use it. And at that point in Dan's career, he had slowed down quite a bit. He had his own problems, not being able to maintain focus or a schedule or anything. And so he asked me to help him ink this giant size book drawn penciled by Luis Garcia Lopez.
Lopez, yeah.
It was Superman versus Wonder Woman.
Cool.
And I was so intimidated, despite never having picked up a quill pen. But he asked me to help him ink backgrounds, you know, the chain link fence back there, or some of the rubble falling off of a building that's collapsing and stuff like, just to move the pages along for him. And he took me in when he delivered the pages. He took me in there. Joe Orlando was the editor-in-chief. And he took the book in there to Joe Orlando, and Joe Orlando looked through the pages, and I'm standing in the doorway. And he says to Dan, he says, "Did he help you with these?" And I nodded, and Dan said, "Yes." He said, "Don't do it again."
Oh.
There you go. Bingham gets his ego stroked one more time.
Oh.
Joe Orlando was a nice guy, and I eventually started getting work there. Just on the, you know, that's when I started getting work on the anthology books and stuff. But yeah, that was another experience. I've got a ton of these stories of Bingham failures as we incrementally move up the chain and trying to be a real artist.
I have a question, Jerry. I mean, obviously they were pretty harsh, you know, on you, but was that, how much of that was hazing? How much of that was just that?
No, I wasn't very good. I admit, you know, every time I bring it up or talk about this stuff, my stuff was really immature, and all I knew is, you know, my own feeble attempts at being other pencilers at the time, and so that's where I was, and I can understand why a lot of my books were redrawn by other artists in places, and you know, my perspective was crap or whatever, and there are inkers who will say that today too, and they better not, because I'm listening. No, I understand. I know one thing. One thing to my advantage is I know where I stand in the universe.
Yeah.
When Roland Mann mentions Remington, I know where I am on that food chain. And I kind of knew from the start when I was doing comics, I was never, well, it also became something that held me back. It was my own dislike for my own work. Or I don't know how to put it, but I never liked my own work. And to this day, paintings that I'm doing now, all I can see are, well, not all I can see. I can see the paintings that are more successful than others. I can see what I've done right, but I can't look at a painting of mine where I don't see what I've done wrong. Wow. And that has come with me from childhood. And
wow.
Yeah, and it's been like I said, my early days in comics, it was beaten into me. Dan Atkins, he'd say, "Jerry, you're never going to make it in this business." He says, "You have beady eyes, and nobody likes a guy with beady eyes." I said, "It's genetics. I can't do anything."
I don't remember that.
He used to call me Bingham. Bingham. I never make it. Look at some of his work. This is wonderful. He was like this his whole life. Okay.
J.D. Correa says every artist is their worst critic. Do you agree with that, Jerry?
Hello, JD. How are you? JD's a buddy.
Okay, very cool. Thanks for jumping on, JD. Ask any questions that you want Jerry to answer here on this live stream.
Yep. And anyhow, so that's that's where my artistic life came from.
Well, hey, here's a name I recognize.
Oh yeah. We are our own worst. Yeah, Phil. Yeah. Now go ahead and criticize me, Phil. Go ahead. Let's hear it. No. Phil's my younger bro. He's pretty cool.
Yeah, JD says he's doing fine, Jerry.
Good deal. Good to hear. So, okay, so that's where I was in Pennsylvania with Dan Atkins and his family living upstairs, me downstairs, listening to all his weird stories. Man, I got stories out of that guy. You never knew quite what to believe, but he was always entertaining. Yeah, but he was so good to so many artists. I mean, he took me in downstairs. He's it wasn't his apartment, it wasn't his building, but he got me the room downstairs, and I was there for as long as I wanted to be. And that was maybe about 3 or 4 years before I found a place up in the Poconos where I could just be away in the woods. A nice little place I could rent for myself.
Yeah.
But Dan, I got nothing bad to say about Dan. He helped a lot of people out. Greg Russell, Val Merrick.
Oh, okay.
So many names in the business who came out of Dan helping them. At one time, he even told me that Jeff Jones spent a week on his couch, and of course went in a different direction. And but I'm trying to think who else.
So he was the guy who had a reputation for basically taking artists under his wings and critiquing them for a bit.
Well, he got his big break by becoming Wally Wood's apprentice.
Okay.
And of course, he had some bad times with Wally, and he claims that he was there when Wally committed suicide.
Oh my goodness!
Wow.
So it wasn't all fun and games back then. But Dan, got through that and made a hell of a name for himself in the comics business as one of the best inkers in the business, basically. And yeah.
Wow.
He came back from one trip into New York, turning in his. After a while, he had a real rough time with deadlines, and he went in. He kept going into Jim Shooter and begging. He said, "Begging, I will get it done this time. I promise." And he went in after having his 10-page job for about a month, and he went into the office and he came back and said, "Bingham." He said he was going to throw me down the elevator. I don't know if he actually said that to him. This is Dan talking now. So, but like I said, Dan was always entertaining. Whatever was that. So in the meantime, because I was always struggling with the comic book art, I never liked my own stuff. That's when I started painting, and I did maybe a dozen or 2 dozen paperback covers for Pinnacle Books, was it?
Oh,
science fiction. The business, just every aspect of the illustration world throws me at some point.
Yeah.
I went in. I doing these science fiction series, bad science fiction series covers, and one was These Lawless Worlds, and it was about this woman who's this gorgeous judge in the universe who goes around with her sidekicks or whatever, and it's sort of like soft porn or something is what it was. So, but in the one cover, I had she's on the cover, and there was a unicorn in the story. So I drew a horse with a spike on the head, and I painted the whole thing up. Everybody thought it was nice, and I went home. And I called them up and I said, do you have another genre? They didn't have work for me, more science fiction work. So I said, well, give me, how about a Western? And he said, well, can you draw horses? I said, it's right there on your desk. It's a unicorn. It's a horse with a spike on his head. But he didn't like my attitude when I said that. So I think that was close to my end there. But this is the turns of the illustration world as I was going through it. So.
Right there on your desk.
It's a horse. It's got a horn. I can take the horn off. I never knew how these art directors thought. I could never second guess them.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe it was a nice way of saying, Jerry, we just don't like your painting. I don't. Anyhow, that's where that is. And then I was bouncing back and forth from Marvel to DC, and finally, I was working at Marvel when I decided my pencils had been butchered way too much from other inkers. And I was almost never, there was a couple inkers did an okay job, but I was almost never happy because they would inevitably redraw all my work and it looked nothing like I had put on paper. And so that was
be frustrating.
That was when when the inker they gave me had any competence at all. I'm not going to name names.
Right. Yeah. We try to only name the ones that we really like.
Yeah, exactly. So, where was I going with that? So that's when I decided I needed to do some stuff on my own, and I did. I kept wanting to get a job on Conan, so I was doing Barbarian Women portfolios, and that's when but because I always had this love of English literature, that's when at some point I decided I was going to do my own graphic novel, and I chose Beowulf. And I hadn't inked much, and so I basically had 4 or 5 inkers that were very different on my drawn table pinned up there, and I was stealing technique like you wouldn't believe. The Europeans, because I had discovered the European artists like Jean Giraud, Mobius,
right.
and Victor de la Fuente. I was in love with this guy's work. That was just this. He had this wonderful scribble line that he used, and you could just, the competence in this guy was just, it was visceral, the way he inked. And I bought everything his I could find, and this guy just floored me. And so when I was developing my own inking style, I couldn't be like him. I didn't have that kind of confidence with the tools, but I did include these little squiggle lines in there in my own inking, and it developed something of my own style with that. And I say my style is my ink style was a combination of Victor de la Fuente, Mobius, Dick Giordano, because he was doing a lot of the Neil Adams stuff at the time. And so I had all, these different inkers that I was swiping from constantly. So I was still working at Marvel when I did the Beowulf graphic novel. And
right.
I remember taking it in there, and Jim Shooter looked at it and he said, "It's nice. It looks like Prince Valiant." I said, "Okay." So I went home and I took it someplace else. And then I took it someplace else. And then eventually, First Comics, they said, "We'll publish it if you do 10 issues of Warp," because we lost our penciler on Warp. And that's the last thing I wanted to do. I said, if you will publish this, promise to publish this, I will do Warp. And that's how I got Beowulf published. And then everybody who rejected me when I was shopping it around, I guess they all voted for me during the award ceremony. At Comic-Con. But I had no idea anybody else even liked it. So that's where that came from.
Well, sometimes don't you think you got to do the thing that you like, and that's people. I think people will gravitate towards that.
Well, I knew nothing of these characters at First Comics, and so you have to have some sort of a feeling, some kind of affinity for the characters, and it's hard to stay that long on a book. I wasn't even reading the books; I was just reading the descriptions and drawing those comic books. I never read a script, but that was most of my time in comics. I very seldom read a full script. I was reading the descriptions, the panel by panel,
right?
Especially the DC stuff, because every panel was described in detail. Yeah. The Marvel stuff you had to read, because the way the Marvel writing style worked, it was the writers would make a rough pass. It's almost like a treatment,
right?
And then hand it off to the artist, and then the artist would do his thing, and then it would go back to the writer, and he would add his own bits of story and dialogue around that.
Right.
But DC was different. The dialogue was all written. The boxes were all described in detail. So I didn't really have to read it.
Well,
I didn't know how much dialogue was in a square, so I could
Right.
had that much room to leave.
Yeah.
I wasn't always successful at it.
But do you having done both of those? Do you have a preference as an artist?
Well, the preference now is just to work on my own stuff. But
Well, yeah, yeah.
I really, it's hard for me to fall in love with anything new in comic books. It's hard for me to stay in love with anything old the way that these characters have turned out over the years.
Yeah.
We won't go into that part.
Right. No, I'm as far as like the methods go. If you were to sit down and do something not your own today, which of those and you can give pros and cons, that's fine. Which of those methods do you think you prefer?
Well, I like having some say in the direction of the story because there's too many writers in the business who are not visual.
Yeah.
And I worked a long time with a few of them where I'd say 9 panels on a page. Right. And all this dialogue, and you're introducing 3 new characters, and I have to create costumes for these characters that you're going to see maybe a quarter of an inch tall in a panel.
Yeah.
And nowadays, or not everybody, but a lot of the books that I don't buy, I flip open and it's all these large splash panels, and it's all you see is the 2 panels on a page, 3 panels on a page, characters all showing. They're all like poster shots.
Right.
And, I keep saying all. I'm generalizing.
Of course.
There are a few that I really like, but for the most part,
the Silverline books, of course.
Of course, everything Silverline does is genius. I love this stuff. Especially Roberta's coloring. My gosh.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Yes.
But yeah, so I never look at Watchmen. Dave Gibbons did 9 panels a page, 10 panels a page. I said, and God bless him for it. I'm not going to do it. And yeah, I love the guy's work, but I can't do 9 panels a page.
Yeah.
So anyhow, yeah. And then in one book I worked on, I kept questioning the physics of it. But to draw something, you have to understand the physics of what's going on in the frame. And when okay, I won't go there. Or how can I get out of this now?
Okay, so Tommy or Roberta, either one of y'all have a question?
I have a comment. How about a comment?
Okay, comment.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So Jerry, you got me early where I was still trying to figure out how to be an artist, and I think that your history was so rich and so impressively difficult that I just had that steel that needed to happen, that I'm going to keep pushing. And I wanted to say thank you for all of that, because it's scary to be an artist as it is, but to see that you can come out of that,
it's I think it's one of for me it was all, well, I'll show you.
Yeah.
It was basically me always walking around with a stiff spine, and because my father was a working class guy. I always say he's the hardest working man I ever knew. I mean, he from construction, whatever he did, and so I cannot fault him for his thinking.
Right.
But for him, the thought of me trying to be an artist was just, I was destroying my life. How could you have to have something to fall back on. I can get you on the fire department because of this, and I just. So when I was a kid, and I graduated from high school, and I wanted to go to the American Academy of Art downtown, and I worked all summer on a beer truck to get into the American Academy of Art, and I screwed off most of the time I was in class. I just wasted that year there. Eventually, and when I didn't want to go back to work on a beer truck, that's when I signed up for the military. but this is the mindset I grew up with. My dad, the laborer, the hardest working guy I ever knew, he could not understand that all I wanted to be was an artist.
Yeah.
And, at some point, you're going to be living in doorways, and he was really, and so that's why I had to pay for my own art schooling. I had a friend of family helped me out, and we figured out other ways for me to do it for the year. But that set something in my brain that said, I'm never going to give up. This is something that, I wanted to do since I was an infant almost. And so there was no falling back on anything. You got to have something to fall back on. A lot of parents say that. And I could not, nothing in me could accept that. I would get angry at the thought of being, when I started working with Dan Atkins, and he's telling me, Jer, he's looking at my work, Jer, they say that, they're across the country every year, hundreds of thousands of artists come out of these art colleges and art schools across the country, and they go to two places. They go to New York and Los Angeles, and you're not going to make it. This is what Dan Atkins told me. And so going from my dad to Atkins, and it was hearing much of the same thing. He'd say, there's nothing wrong with driving a cab. There's nothing wrong with it. You should be, and I would blank all them out, and I had tunnel vision at that point. There's nothing anybody could say, even after I went to work and was getting all this, everybody hating my work at the companies. I just say, I went home in the back of my head, I can improve this. I've been improved. I could look at my old stuff. I could see improvement, and I would work to improve. And I tell the story. My first couple of years there at Marvel, I probably spent more time erasing pages than I did drawing them because I hated my own work.
Wow.
It was almost to the point where it's not like I had artist block where I couldn't work. No, I just couldn't look at my work. And so I would, yeah, that's it too. Yeah. Philip says, maybe you didn't want Dad to say, I told you so. That too. I got his stubborn Irish streak. So, but yeah, and so I did a lot of erasing those first few years. I was always able to get a deadline met, but it was 10, 12, 14 hours a day sometimes at the drawing board. And
those are long hours.
Yeah, well, I've done it other places too.
Yeah. Bobby Wiskovich says, hello, big dummy. Cheryl on Facebook at home.
Bobby. Hello, Bobby.
What's up, Screw Loose? In case you didn't know, Jerry, he calls me big dummy. That's my father-in-law.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
So thank you for that. So that's pretty cool.
Did I fill the hour? Is it time to go home?
No, not yet. Not yet. They're
no, and
still...
I have some Hollywood questions on how.
Yeah, I was going to say we still got all the questions here.
I want to ask you a question about you working at Malibu with these guys. Whenever we have somebody that was actually in the office over there, tell me some embarrassing things that you remember from these guys, because I was
only there one day a week. But the thing I remember most is I kept seeing
besides you were doing nude models in front of Curtis when he was 13. Besides that, what?
Curtis, how old were you? 9, 8?
4.5. No,
4.5.
15. I think 15, I was there from 15 to 18. I think. Yeah.
My time at Malibu, well, it was like I said, it was only one day a week. I was in there just fixing up stuff and talking to the colorists about color and stuff. Yeah, the thing I remember most about Malibu is I kept seeing headlines on the news about mailmen going into the office with automatic weapons, and I thought to myself, no. No.
I hadn't heard of this.
Not at all. Basically, at my time in Malibu, I don't have a lot of really embarrassing stories because I usually just when I wasn't talking to the colorists, we had our meeting there once a week where we would talk about computer color and that sort of thing. I usually just went in my corner and sat at the drawing board and did whatever somebody slide something across my desk and say, this is what we need. And so I really wasn't, I didn't work on a book, I don't think, did I? Oh yeah, I did the Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That, yeah. I've already talked to Roland about this, so I'm not
Yeah. So you that was more of a consulting kind of role, wasn't it? Isn't it?
Yeah, that's
I don't remember what your specific title was.
Art consultant.
Art consultant. Yeah,
something like that.
I do remember that you talked with all of the artists, because we had the kind of a bullpen there, but we had the coloring department, and then we had guys in there who did inks, and we had color guides on staff, and we had letterers. The only thing we didn't have was an on-staff penciler.
Well, I did some lettering while I was there. I had some logos, and then
right.
I also, there was a time when I was I remember drawing some pages for other artists that didn't get in on time, like George Perez and was it Barry Windsor Smith was doing Rune, and so
oh yeah,
I did a few pages on those books. But like I spent so little time in the office, I really didn't, do that much of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was also, yeah, Jerry, you're such an old curmudgeon. Well, at the time, I had just gone through my first hip replacement.
Yeah.
I spent, was it when I was 30, the osteoarthritis started to get me bad because of all the martial arts I was doing. And so by the time I hit 40, it was around 1990. It was the year of the Northridge earthquake that I had my first hip replacement. But I was in such pain for years before that. Yeah. So that's when you guys met me.
Yeah. No, I actually remember you had a hip gait that when you walked around the office, you could tell that your hip was hurting often.
Yeah,
you had one of those hip.
I'm sure somebody knows, because before I had the surgery, well, the doctor at UCLA, the surgeon at UCLA, I said, when will I know that and he says, you'll know when to have the surgery, because you will not be able to do anything without it.
Yeah,
and that's what happened eventually. I couldn't walk the length of a parking lot. I was in such excruciating pain. To describe it, this is getting maudlin. Should kids do that? Well, just to get this over with. When you've got that osteoarthritis in your hips, it feels like your nerves feel like you have broken glass in your hip joint.
Wow!
And that's what it feels when, and it gets worse. And so, eventually, this feeling of broken glass on the nerves in between the ball joint of your hip, you just can't do without it. And so that's when I finally, 1994, Northridge earthquake. Yeah. That's when I finally said, I got no choice. I can't walk to my car. So that's what that was. Anyhow, so let's get happy.
All right, so
Jerry feels better today.
So what would you say? You got to go into, there's a lot of people who dream and imagine and I guess maybe fantasize about being able to go into the Marvel offices. Certainly in the days of the 70s and 80s. I don't know that people dream about hanging out at the Marvel offices so much today. Maybe they do. I don't know. But there's
are they allowed?
I don't know. I doubt it. It's in California, so I doubt it. But there's a lot of there's a lot of people that you hear. Oh, I'd love to have been able to wander around the office and and see the bullpen and Ramita's Raiders and all that kind of stuff. You got to do it. What are a couple of the highlights from doing that? So you kind of told the everybody hated Jerry's art stories. What are the?
I guess they all didn't hate it because I did keep getting work.
Yeah, you kept.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, they didn't tell you not to ever come back. Yeah, so something was going right.
Well, yeah, they kept paying you to do work, so they didn't.
Eventually the work became. try to think back. After a while, Marvel, they kept passing me around. It got to, I couldn't stay on a book for very long because I was being bounced from Marvel Team Up to Marvel 2-in-1. And I do a couple books here and a couple books there. And I kept asking for my own book.
Right.
And none of the editors would give me one after a certain point. And then I saw a new artist come by. Frank Miller came in the office and immediately took over Daredevil. And more power to him. The guy was great. And he impressed the hell out of me, the stuff him and Klaus Janson was doing on those books. So I can't complain about that.
Right.
But I always thought that, there had to have been a book they could have given me somewhere that I could have made my own. And I realized my stuff when I started out was very immature, my drawing. But towards the end there, I was getting better. And I still never got what I wanted, so I had to walk. I went over to DC, and that's when I talked to a few people there. And by that point, the Beowulf graphic novel was out, and I had gotten some name recognition off of that. And I'm trying to put this in some kind of chronological order here. I went to DC, and I know what it was. I had done those little 2-page stories, filler stories for the anthology books, and I opened a comic reader because I knew what fanzines were at that point.
Right.
I opened a comic reader, and I saw that Mike Barr had signed to write the first Batman graphic novel. And all I knew of Mike Barr was I drew a little 2-page story with him in one of those anthology books. But I got his phone number. I called him up and I said, "Do you have an artist yet?" And he said, "Not yet." And I said, "How about it?" And he said, "Yeah, okay." And so he passed my name.
That was easy.
Along, and history was made, as they say.
Well, so Son of the Demon was your first DC work?
Not my first. Well, while I was working on it, I was doing a lot of stuff. That wasn't my first DC work, but it was the milestone.
Yeah.
I can't remember all the books. I had not a lot. My first DC story was a Speedy story, Green Arrow's pal.
Oh, yeah.
The first story way back when. And I had done, a lot of little stuff like that. After I left Marvel and went over, I was still living in Pennsylvania. I was renting a house in the Poconos. And, I had bought a house in the Poconos, actually. It was, it was my first house. It cost me about $25,000 or something.
Wow!
But it was a mobile home that somebody had converted. They put a porch on it and they put a side bedroom on it. And then it was like
it sounds like a lot of houses in Mississippi,
but out in the woods. And so anyhow, that's where I was when I finished the Beowulf and started getting more work from DC. I had done a lot of work for First Comics, doing the Warp and a few other things. And when I
says Pennsylvania love.
Okay. Pennsylvania was great for me. It's close enough to New York. I didn't care for winter, and I didn't care for shoveling snow. And where was I going with that?
Mike Barr's Son of the Demon.
Mike Barr's Son of the Demon. Well, before that, that's where I was living when I signed the contract for that. Yeah. And while I was working on that book, that's when I decided to move to California, because in the back of my mind at that point, I was going to work in movies. I could see the end of my comic book career ahead of me.
Wow.
I don't know how old I was.
We lost Tommy.
Yeah, we lost Tommy.
Yeah. So I kind of always knew that there was a time limit to my career in comics, because I could see the lives of the people who came before me. The way they treated people like Herb Trimp and people like Gene Cole and all these guys who I grew up in love with, who created Marvel Comics, and they were being kicked to the curb. Yeah. And I said, there is a ticking clock on this career, and that's my paperback paintings weren't jumping off the shelves of people. But I was interested in making movies at some point along the way, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. But in the meantime, I'm still working in comics when I moved across country. And so I was working on The Son of the Demon while I was there, and spent a lot of time working on it. A year and a half. My contract was, I made sure I had plenty of room in the contract. I said a year and a half, but Mike was behind on, not behind, I know he had his own schedule, but by the time I received the plot, it was already a year since I signed the contract.
Wow.
And so I was already hearing notes of pressure from the people, a couple of the people at DC. and I had to tell them, I said, it was a year from when I received the script, right? And yeah, but don't sit on it too long. I'm working on it every day. In the meantime, they're giving me comic book covers to do. I did Suicide Squad covers. I did detective covers. I did a lot of covers while I was doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And when I first moved to California, and trying to dip my toe in the movie business, I had done the one movie adaptation for a comic for a one shot called Outer Heat. I bet you don't know the movie Outer Heat. It was renamed to Alien Nation.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Cool.
And I knew Marty Pasco. We had a little poker group there in Los Angeles, and Marty Pasco knew the writer, Dan O'Bannon, Rockney O'Bannon, and so I did that while I was there, and it was one of those jobs that, it's like so many Hollywood jobs, you just it's not the reason I'm bald. It's the reason. It's because you go in to meet the execs. You're doing the adaptation. So not meeting the execs. You're meeting the art director and people involved in the film, and you sign this non-disclosure agreement, of course. But then, well, we can't let you take any of the materials. So what do you mean you can't? I can't see what any of this looks like. They let me look through slides in the office. I'm looking at the slide projector. I don't have a slide projector at home, but I'm looking at slides on with their projector, and I knew the script at this point, and so I had to look through like a couple hundred slides that afternoon, sitting in the studio offices, trying to pick for them to make stills for me, and I was only allowed to make so many, like maybe 20 stills of the entire movie. And so I was picking anyhow. So this is what I went home with. I was sent home with about 20 stills and maybe about 30 slides they let me take home, with the promise that I would never let anybody see these. So help me God, and
Right.
and so I worked on this comic, the entire movie adaptation, with these little slides taped to my overhead light, because I didn't have a slide projector, and I didn't think I could afford one at that time. So I got these stills over here, taped on the drawing board, and I got the slides taped to my overhead light, and then got a magnifying glass and I'm drawing, and so I did that whole book like that. And somebody liked it. Actually, at one of the poker games, Marty Pasco said to me, he showed the book to Rockney, the writer. He said, "This looks better than the movie." So, we got a nice pat on the back from somebody, and it was the writer of the movie Alien Nation. That's such a cool thing for me then.
Wow, that is cool.
Yeah, and what else? I'm trying to think of.
That's cool.
Where else I was going along those lines?
Didn't you go to Disney Imaginarium at some point? Is that?
Yes, I did. They had an opening in Imagineering it was a brand new facility that was not going to be in the park. It was going to be outside the park, Pleasure Island area, which I've never been to. So I don't know where it's at. It was called Disney Quest. And it was a brand new facility, and they were working on a ride called, or an attraction. Everything was, the whole facility was built around computer generated games and little attractions, things like that. And so they had, the reason I got the job, they had Len Wein to write this ride called Ride the Comics. And it was the conceit was you put on these virtual reality headsets and you sat in the chair and the chair would vibrate and whatever. And the story would play out and you would fly in and out of comic book pages. And the bad guys, you know, they may be trying to climb over into your little space car there and attack you with hammers or whatever, and you would fight them off with your virtual reality sword. And so anyhow, the reason I got the job there was Len Wein and this Ride the Comics. And at some point, well, actually, when we first started there, they didn't have many artists working on this attraction. They had like 2 guys in-house, 2 illustrators in-house, but most of it was coming from artists that they would just, you know, pull it off the street. Can you draw something that looks like Star Wars? So, and it's all very blue sky at that time. Yeah. Nothing was in stone. They had one attraction. They had the rights to do a Star Wars themed space shuttle deal, and then they had the Ride the Comics they were working on, and they had a couple other things. But I started there, and the first meeting we had, the guy who was heading the project, he said to us, would you rather work at home? You can work from home or you can work in the office. Well, I knew from experience that it's easier to keep working if you're working in the office. When they can see you every day, when they see your pencil moving, when they see you turning out product and see how hard you're working, you're more likely for them to push the next thing onto your desk. Yes. And I knew that going in, and I said, well, if you've got room here, set me up. I'll work here. It was 2-hour ride in rush hour traffic each way to my house. So it was a real decision. But Len chose to work at home, and at some point they had a problem, and I guess they didn't see the output he was doing. I had no idea what he was working on after a certain point, because I was, after a week there and with my ear to the cubicle wall, I would hear the producers complaining about, we've got nobody, nobody's giving us what we want here. We got this space deal, the alien invasion thing, and nobody's can paint what we have. And so I went home that weekend, and without telling anybody, I did 2 acrylic paintings of this spaceship being attacked by these monsters and aliens. And I went in there Monday morning and I laid it on the art director's desk. Not the art director's, but the project head's desk. And he looked at them and he left the room and he came back and he said, we'd like to make you art director of attractions. That was my first week there. And so yeah, that was that's called watching that brass ring come around. And when you see it, you can't let it go by. Wow. You gotta throw yourself at it, and that's what I did. I was brought in to Ride the Comics, and after a week, I was working on 28 different attractions simultaneously.
Good grief!
That's amazing.
Yeah. And so when I mentioned before about putting in 14-hour days, 7 days a week, month after month, without a day off, and I was doing 10 to 14 hours a day, not counting 2 hours there and back each way under LA traffic.
Good grief!
So, yeah, that was. I'm surprised I didn't walk away with an ulcer.
No kidding. Yeah.
What was the year that you were doing that?
What was the year? I have some notes I've written down over here. Hang on. 1995.
Okay.
So right after Malibu.
Yeah, I was going to say this is after the
right
Malibu
after
stuff.
Malibu.
Wow.
Well, was it after Malibu or before Malibu?
95 would have been after.
95 is after.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So it was around 95ish. So yeah, that's when people ask you, well, what did you do with your artwork, with your illustration? I said, You cannot name a thing I have not done with my artwork. Where'd you go after comics? Anywhere I could.
What were some of the attractions that you did designs for and stuff?
What's that?
What were some of the attractions that you did designs for?
Everything in Disney Quest. There was a 4-story building.
Yeah. We're here in Orlando. Did they ever do a Disney Quest there in California? It was just the one here, right?
Well, they did one in Chicago, and they did one.
That's right.
Did one in overseas, but they failed real quick because the one in Chicago. Where do you park? They hit downtown Chicago, amid the high rises, and with a Chicago winter, nobody's going to want to stand outside in line for an hour to get into a building. And so basically, there was poor planning on somebody's part. It collapsed fairly quickly. And the Disney Quest went on the longest, the one in Florida.
Yeah.
Because things, it was just outside Disneyland or Disney World. So.
Yeah, it was in the downtown Disney area.
Yeah. I wish I could have seen it while it was still open. I know it's closed now, but
yeah, they built a basketball thing in it that's now not doing very well. It would
have been nice when they put the thing together if they'd given some of us a trip out there. Because after I'd worked on the attraction side of things for 2 years, and the hell of 2 years, when a project like this is going on, it's a brand new facility. Nobody knows what it's going to look like when they start up. That's when I started there, and they kept coming. They'd come up with a new something, and you'd work on it, designs for it, and then something else would come across your desk. Well, they're working on development for this dinosaur. It was Virtual Jungle Cruise, and what it was, they had. I can take me hours to describe this stuff. There's a large cubicle, and they had these very large airbags that were computer controlled. And you had a rubber raft, a 4-person rubber raft on top of these airbags, and there was a screen in front.
Yeah.
And you ride down the river, and it was called Virtual Jungle Cruise. And when he told me they explained to me the ride, I said, why make it Jungle Cruise? Why not make it a dinosaur cruise? And because I was looking at Dinotopia at the time, the James Gurney stuff, which incredible artwork. But I had, it was only a couple months before I picked up that book. So when they said Jungle Cruise, I said, make it kids would rather see dinosaurs.
Yeah.
That's how I put it. And basically I swung everybody's opinion. Yeah, we should make it. Why not make it what Cretaceous Cruise is what I called it. I don't know what it wound up being called.
Didn't they end up converting it to they did something like that in there because we wrote it. It was
yes.
They convert to a pirate's ride? Didn't they convert it into a pirate thing too? They had some little parlays for it, didn't they?
I don't know if the pirate ride was the same thing because I remember working on a pirate ride as well.
Yeah.
But I know the dinosaur raft ride. Philip says there was one in Houston.
Yeah.
Thanks, Phil. Yeah, I know the dinosaur one got me because that was one of the most popular attractions, and I also, God, I did so much there. There was a Wild Ducks hockey thing. It was basically cartoon duck. I was drawing everything I said from spaceships to cartoon ducks to Aladdin stuff to Jurassic Cruise. I was doing all this stuff, and we had they had come up with a bumper car deal, right? And they didn't know how it was going to be designed, but that was going to be the pirate thing. There were cannons on the front of these bumper cars, and
that's right.
Like volleyballs or something, and and on the side of these bumper cars, there was like an X. And if you hit it in the right spot, you could spin the other guy's car.
That's awesome.
That sounds fun.
Great concept. And they took me over and they showed me, the mechanics inside the car before it was built. And I had to design a body for these cars. And so I basically, somebody else, I can't take credit for the concept, but it was kind of themed, kind of Jetson. And so I took that idea and I created. It was difficult to craft these cars because, you know, as designing as I wanted to make them creatively, there were limitations because you couldn't have fins sticking out where bumper cars would hit. You couldn't have anything that stuck further out. Everything was measured to the inch, you know. So if you had little bits of design stuff that was crafted onto the mobile, you know, it would interfere. And of course, everything had to be solid because you're being hit with these volleyballs that coming out of cannons. And so, anyhow, that was another popular thing from what they told me.
So we got things here. Mackenzie Wortman is joining us for the very first time. Mackenzie, you're muted, Mackenzie.
You're muted, Mackenzie. There we go.
Sorry.
There you go. That's okay.
Did you want me to share art, by the way?
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and share? All right. So a really quick introduction here, Jerry. Mackenzie is writing an upcoming series for us.
Nice.
So yeah, and I have been on her for
ever.
Let's just say weeks and weeks to join us, and so she's first joining us. So she gets to join us with the Jerry Bingham stream.
Well, nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
All right, so we
Jerry.
So anyway, to finish up the Disney thing, I don't know. Finish up. I could do this for months.
Yeah, don't, because we got another question.
But yeah, the Disney, to wrap up the Disney thing, I was, after over 2 years working on 28 different attractions, and then I hired outside a couple other illustrators to come in to, you know, as I would art direct, and I couldn't do all the art for all of them. And the initial stages, the first year in the project, when nobody knew what was happening, just imagine me and a couple other guys working our cans off in our cubicles, creating as much art as we could possibly create in the space of a week, so that Monday morning the art would go on display boards to have the bean counters meeting with all the heads of Imagineering. You had Eisner and Ovitz and all these guys would come around and sit around, and I was never allowed in the meetings because it had to be the top guys who explained everything to them. But they would explain stuff, and then they would come back to me after the meeting, and they would say,
No.
Well, we would like you, you know, we don't want this to be pirates. We want to change that to cavemen. So, okay. So I would sit there for the next week and redesign everything top to bottom. And I did this for almost a full year, just meeting after every week, a meeting with the big shots and just redesigning everything. I'd throw away everything you've done last week and start again over and over and over again. And that takes something out of you.
Wow. I can only imagine.
Yeah. But at the end of where I was going with this was at the end of 2 years, at some point, the head of the project came by and said, Jerry, we're kind of we're putting the finishing touches on these attractions, on these rides, whatever. We have the facility we have to work on. We are working on. They had 4 floors of the facility. Was it 4 floors or 5? 4 floors of the facility.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 floors. They had 3 of the top designers in the country, architectural designers in the country, working on 3 of the floors, and they did not have one for the 4th floor. He said, "Can you read a blueprint?" And I said, "Sure, I can read a blueprint." So on my way home that night, I stopped at the art store and bought myself an architect's ruler, and I went in there early the next morning, and I went back to where the architects worked in the back of the shop, and I said, "Could you explain some of this stuff to me?" The one guy who was a great guy, I owe him so much. He had this big blueprint laid on the table for one Florida building, and he said, "Here's where the height of the door frame. Here's where how many steps and how deep each step has to be, and we have to have the handicap ramp, and we have to do that, and this is where the size of this is." And he showed me how it was written out and labeled all over the blueprints. And I went back to my cubicle and I looked at my architect's rule and I cried. No, I didn't. No, I just actually, I just sat down and I just started designing where the attractions would fit onto this floor, because I knew the footprint of the attraction itself. I knew the size of what they were putting, the box that the rafts were in. I knew how close to a wall something had to be. And so when I took up the blueprint and I had it to the side, I had my other artwork spread out. So I knew what was going on to that floor. And I started doing, I had never done architectural rendering. But it's one of those things, you just do it. You get, there is no fear. You go in, what can they say? You're fired?
Right. Yeah.
But they weren't going to do that. I knew I had, at some point, my boss came by and said, Jerry, you're doing the work of 3 people here. So I knew I had them on my side for the most part if I could pull it off. And so I designed this floor and where all these attractions fit. It was the Explore Zone. So I had the dinosaur floor, and there was a balcony that went around. We had Aladdin up there on the balcony, and and
I'm visualizing it because we went to it several times when we first moved down here.
Tommy, because I was there, I never saw the finished product. I don't know what I designed actually made it onto the walls, but I did the preliminary paintings for, I don't know, there should have been one wall up there that morphs from Aladdin into Hercules. There was
I'm trying to remember.
Yeah.
Remember you had the bottom floor that got you into the building. That was really weird. I remember one of the floors had like video games just everywhere. There was another floor that had, like what you were saying, they had the Aladdin stuff and all that kind of stuff. And
it was Aladdin, Hercules, the dinosaur thing.
I think so. Yeah. In a virtual roller coaster kind of a thing was in there.
There was supposed to also be. It was supposed to be like an Indiana Jones thing where there were remote control Jeeps.
Yeah, that was like a whole section where you got to see a little screen, and then you could see the glass floor where the little Jeeps were running around underneath the floor and stuff.
Well, I had to design that to fit in.
Oh, that was your fault. The reason why we kept running into the walls and all that kind of stuff.
It's my fault. Yeah, exactly. Well, it was supposed to fit underneath this pyramid. Was there a hanging pyramid?
Yeah. It worked out. It was fun.
It hung off the mezzanine, and this track was actually underneath the pyramid. The way I drew it.
Yeah, the floor. You could see through the floor, and you could see the little cars. So you would, like my wife and I would go. I'd be driving around, and I said, "The car's over there around the corner." And she'd probably see the car going around. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, I created that maze.
Yeah, each had like a little camera on it or something like that, so you could see what was going on.
There was something I know did not make it. It was the real shame. They wanted a cool way to get from the mezzanine to the ground floor, and we had the Aladdin where the pyramid was that went down to the remote control Jeeps. But if you went along from Aladdin, you went to the Hercules side of the building, and it was the Hercules cartoon, right? And so I had the trees at that end designed the way they were designed in the cartoon, very I forget the name of the artist who inspired that's part of it, but they were very designy. But the cool way that I came up with to get down from the balcony to the bottom was the Hydra slide. And what it was a tube that came off of the Hercules side of the mezzanine down to the ground floor, and it was a Hydra head that the kids would come out of the mouth.
I don't remember that.
No, that was canceled after so much work was done on it. Because coming down this slide, the space they had to work with, kids were coming down pretty fast. And so, theoretically, because it wasn't ever made. But at the bottom of the slide, they had to have a soft sculpt down there so the kids had something to run, to bang into when they got down the slide. And I created the soft sculpt for me was Hades from the Hercules movie. Hades and his 2 little minions there with the red glowing lights and everything. So these kids are coming down into hell basically when they came out of the slide. And well, I think Michael Eisner didn't care for that. It was a little too scary for the little kids, and I guess I can understand that. But at the time, I put so much work into it, and I was so proud of it.
Jerry, we've got a question from Infrafran here who says, what was your initial reaction when you found that recognition by receiving your own title at DC? And when did you finally realize Marvel wasn't going to play?
Well, the Marvel play thing. Yeah, that was, I don't know what year it was. But you look it up by seeing when I did all those team ups and 2-in-1s. Because then I was being passed from one editor to the other. And at the time, and one of the reasons that bothered me so much was Jim Shooter had instituted this policy where if you stayed on a book for 6 issues in a row, you got a bonus check. And so that's another incentive to stay on a book, despite just wanting to make a character my own. But it seemed like I would do 3 books over here, and then they send me off, and I do 2 over here, and they send me back, and I do 2 or 3 or 4 over here, and I never got 6 issues in a row. And at that point, I was kind of, my ego got the better of me, I guess, and I said, that's when I said I got to go check out DC, and the DC stuff took over. Took over my life for quite a few years there.
Also says, can I ask about his work on Tron? So there's not a specific thing there. So
the movie, I had worked. Most of my storyboard work was for special effects companies, and special effects and title sequences, and so Tron was a title sequence that I had done some storyboarding for. I was never. I very seldom got my name in the credits because you have to be union for most of these, and I was never in a union. I was working for. They said I was working for a third-party signatory, working for the special effects companies. Therefore, I was not eligible to get union status for all those years. So another big complaint of mine that I won't go into detail on because I wanted to.
I've never heard of that. Wow. So let me ask, so here's a question for you. All these storyboards that you did for this, do you have those or
I have a lot of them. Yeah.
What's that?
I have a lot of them.
Okay.
I started posting some of them when I was back in my Facebook days. And I actually had the boss at one of the companies telling me that, Jerry, you can't be posting all this stuff. You signed a non-disclosure agreement, and the companies we work for will not like this. And so basically, one of the reasons I left Hollywood, ultimately, is because I had my name on nothing. I couldn't even open my portfolio to show other people to get work. I was getting a lot of work from these few companies that knew me. And so, I was never really without work, but the fact that I could not, it was always a week here, 2 weeks there, bounce here, bounce there. I couldn't get the union benefits, the medical or where. And so eventually I went in one year. I was at the one company for, what was it? Over 10 years maybe.
Wow.
And I went in and asked for a raise one day, and the boss said, well, we can't quantify your value to these projects because we have so many people working on these projects. We can't quantify your value. And after all my years there, when he said that, and that's in the back of my mind, I said, I'm done. And I think I put in another year after that, but that's when I left Hollywood.
Wow.
I couldn't get in a union. I couldn't show my portfolio to anybody. And so, yeah. That's
frustrating.
I go from one tragic story to the next. Thank you, Roland. I'm over it.
That's what I'm here for.
I'm over it.
Can I ask, is that the hypocrisy of the whole thing, or is that a calculated move on studios to keep people kind of locked into working for them and not going to work for a competitor? Or
they have these companies, they're the biggest some of the biggest companies that were doing these titles and such. They have a lot of artists to choose from.
Yeah.
They kept coming back to me though, and they had certain projects like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies, and the couple of companies. The one company that was working on that, he really wanted me back to do the storyboarding on those because of my comic book background, of course.
Right.
But at that time, I was already out. I was done with it all. So I started with the one company. I never wanted to do storyboards. Never. It's a grueling, thankless job, and I knew this before I started. I started as a production illustrator. I actually went to UCLA to study production design. That was my ultimate goal, and become a production designer. But I was working as a production illustrator, and my first job I got from Malibu. Thank you, Malibu, for that. I was in the Malibu offices, and I forget who came by. Maybe it was your boss there. Somebody came by and said they're looking for Wes Craven is looking for an artist. He knew somebody at the company, probably your boss.
Chris Owen, probably, yeah.
Yeah, and he was looking for somebody to work on his new Nightmare. He had a new Freddy movie he was working on, and I said me. So I made appointments, and I went over, and Wes Craven was my first director that I actually worked with side by side, and he was the best. I was so sad to see him pass. He was the first day I walked into his office. I never walked into a director's office before, never. So the first day I walked into his office, and he's a red flannel shirt, torn blue jeans, dirty sneakers propped up on his desk, and take a chair, and started talking to me about stuff. I said, oh, cool. How cool is this? This is movies? Why haven't I been doing this forever? And so, yeah, he was the first and the best. And he obviously liked what I did on his Freddy Krueger. I designed new makeup for the guy. They went from being the burn scars to basically it was, the idea was Freddy's claws are real claws because he's in hell. This is the devil, Freddy. And so I had just watched, the Johnny Depp movie, Scissorhands.
Scissorhands, yeah.
And so I was inspired by the fact that Johnny Depp didn't have these gaping wounds. He had like scars on his face because, it was the accidental, as he's growing used to his claws or whatever, he created these scars all over. And so I took that conceit to Freddy, who was basically a psychopath who would probably scratch his face on purpose. So he wound up with all these big gaping wounds on his face with muscle and sinew showing through. And I took the drawings into Wes and said, perfect, I love it. And that's what they did with that.
Wow.
And then when Wes went on to do his next movie, Vampire in Brooklyn, he asked me over onto that one. And I designed the makeup. I never got credit for it. It's not, the makeup department did. But I designed the makeup, and I designed a lot of props for that movie. And that was, for me, that was great. Before I could become a production designer, I just wanted to do that forever. And then I went over to, I got picked up at Digital Domain because I knew a couple writers who were working over there with their project. And I was there for over a year. And the writers, they're very famous writers. I'm not going to say their name, but they're a very famous writing duo who basically you would know every movie they were on, and Jerry Bruckheimer, and to Disney to whatever. And these guys are just phenomenons in the industry. And I knew the one guy from the poker games, and he told me that they were looking for somebody to do some pre-production art to sell their project. So Digital Domain could sell a project to the executives at these other companies. And so these writers had the money. They paid for my time out of their own pocket.
Wow.
For nearly a year. And I was making Disney money. I was making a lot of dough back then. and so God bless them. They liked my stuff enough to keep me around. And at some point, I was working on 4 different movies at the same time for them, doing concept art, paintings to storyboards. I was doing everything that they needed to sell their project to And Morgan Freeman was in one day. The Rock was in. They had all these celebrities coming in to these pitch meetings to get their studios on board for these movie projects that never got made.
Wow.
With the sin of it, after all that work and all the struggle and trying to make stuff perfect, you can still get stuff canceled in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Easier than getting it made.
So. I was going to say, I would be willing to guess, if it was just a guess on mine, that there's probably more not made than there are made out there.
Oh, of course. Of course. There was, I actually, while I was there, I was doing some stuff outside the studio, but Digital Domain had control of some special effects sequences and that sort of thing. So I was doing some stuff for Secondhand Lions. You know that movie?
Yeah, yeah.
I love that movie.
Yeah.
And so, but I got to work on several, important scenes on that movie while I was working on these 4 other movies at the same time.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
But it's pretty cool when you look back and you think about all the stuff you've done in your life. At the time, you're just thinking how tired you are at the end.
Right.
You're thinking about that drive the next day going into the office. You're thinking about, am I going to get carpal tunnel? Is my hand going to fall off?
Yeah.
Am I going to go blind? So, but nobody can say I didn't work hard.
Yeah.
Whether it was good or not. Anyhow.
No.
So that was, and then after Digital Domain, that's when I got a call from this Ewan company, it was this titles company, because they were doing the Hulk movie, the first Ang Lee's Hulk, and they were doing the opening sequence on Ang Lee's Hulk, and they needed somebody who could draw comic books, and there I was.
Yeah.
What do you need to do? Well, we need somebody to storyboard the opening sequences and all. And I said, okay. And that weekend I went and sat in the big chair in Barnes & Noble with all the storyboard books in front of me, reading them cover to cover for days, so that when I went in Monday morning, I knew what I was doing when I started drawing and stuff. That's my whole life. And I remember, I have so many segues, I don't know how to fit them all in.
Well, we'll just have to invite you back for another one.
Yeah, it was something unrelated that I remembered, and I've heard it from other people as well. The same anecdote. For a while, I was thinking, maybe I can be a director, and so I wanted to learn the other jobs too. I just finished the production design class, and so I said, well, if I'm going to be a director, what else can I try to do? And so I said, okay, I'm going to take acting classes. but I was petrified every time I got on stage. I would feel like everybody could see me sweat. Like I said when we were talking earlier, me talking in front of an audience. But anyhow, two things I took away from that class, that teacher. She's a great teacher. She came from the London stage. She taught me how to read Shakespeare and understand it. And she told me, the other thing she told me was, if a director said, whatever the director asks you, you can do. If a director says, can you ride a horse? You say, yes, I can ride a horse. And then you go home and learn how to ride a horse.
Yeah.
Never say, no, I don't know something. And I took that away from that class to almost every job I had after that.
Yeah.
I go to the store. I didn't even buy the storyboard books. I sat there and read them in the store.
The employee's giving you the stink eye, right?
What's that?
The employee's all giving you the stink eye. He's been sitting there for 3 hours.
Always hot coffee. But so that's how I got into storyboarding, was with you and company and Ang Lee. And then he kept hiring me for the next 10 years. And his partner that had split off and started his own company, he called me over and I started working for him. And I worked for half a dozen different companies like that without ever getting into a union, which was I call it Bingham's Bane. And I hate the union. And I think there's going to be anything good about it at this point. My father, I belong to 3 unions: the firemen's union, the electricians union. I said, Dad, it doesn't. I can maybe talk to something. No, Dad, you can't talk to anybody in Hollywood. You're not going to do it. He really wanted to help. But it was lot of storyboard jobs after that for a guy who never wanted to draw storyboards. But that's where I could make money.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think it's always interesting to hear how you got a plan to do one thing, and then sometimes life sends you in another direction.
Like I said, you just have to be ready for it when it happens.
Yeah.
And if you're not ready, be able to jump on the horse real quick.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
It's, like I said, going from comic books and not knowing where I was going to end up in Hollywood, if I was going to do anything. I knew what I wanted to do, but I never really got to do it.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, Jerry, our time has flown by, and we have been. Would you believe we've been doing this for almost 2 hours?
Can you believe that? Yeah, I need to pass out.
So,
anybody else there got a quick question for me or anything that you want?
I just want to say about Jerry and Roland. I talk about you. You know, even when we're not on the show. You know, hands down, one of my favorite Batman artists of all time.
Yeah.
Son of Demon, one of the best books, and Talia al Ghul never looked better than when you drew her. And definitely, I think one of the things that I've always loved about your art is how solid, consistent, and thorough it is, which is something that you just don't see a lot nowadays. You're a true illustrator through and through, and that's so rare, and it's rare and rare as time goes on. And I think it's timeless.
Yeah.
I think you're hands down one of the best comic artists I know. So. And for everybody that worked at Malibu, you know, I know you said you were only there one day a week, but I think you influenced everybody that had any inclination for art and improved everybody. So I just had to say that, and hope everybody that's watching.
Well, you know, to that point, you know, as good as you thought I was, and I never thought I was very good, but that feeling that I was never very good is how I got to where I am now, because I was never satisfied with anything I did. And regardless of what anybody else said, I could see the fault in my own work. And so I was always looking for inspiration from somewhere else. And when I teach the occasional workshop now, I have to tell people, all you ever want to do in life is draw comic books. But trust me, if you take a photography class and learn to develop your own photos, you will learn stuff from the lighting and the shadowing on those photos. If you sculpt, you will learn how to see things in 3D. Whatever you do artistically should inspire what you are working on now, and try to just yank every bit of information you can out of all those little tasks. Yeah. And that's how I got to where I am, however little fame I've got. So
that's I think that's absolutely good advice. Anybody else?
Well, I wanted to say, it's just so inspiring to see your work ethic, your dedication, your knowledge, and then just the fact that you are able to take on any task, really.
Yeah.
You know, I really admire that, because it's hard to get yourself to where you say, you know, you don't have fear of not knowing how to do what you're going to embark on.
Well, somebody I think it was Steve Mitchell, actually, the inker. He said when I was showing him some of the stuff I was bringing home from Disney, he said, Jerry, you may not be the best at anything, but you're like the best middle infielder. You can pick up a ball. You can pick up a ball from anywhere and throw it to first base.
Play any position.
Yeah. So
that's a baseball analogy for all of you comic book geeks listening.
I have no idea. So it was because I was never satisfied, and like I said, I was working at comics. I went over to paint paperback covers, and I went from there, back to comic books, and then I went out to Hollywood. And so like I said before, I knew my time in comics was limited, so I was almost desperately searching for my next thing. And I wasn't about to let any opportunity go by, because you never know where it's going to go.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so everybody leave Silverline and go work in movies right now, today. This is your future.
I want to announce the formation of my new company, Redline Comic Books.
Redline.
Roland's going to hit a hit squad out after me.
Yeah. I won't remind you the power I have of the button over here.
Yeah. You can put it anywhere.
All right, so we'll go around and tell folks where they can find you online. Mackenzie, don't bail just yet, okay? Tommy,
Okay.
where can folks find you on the interwebs?
Well, if you need anything printed, go over to Kablam Digital Printing, kablam.com. But you can find stuff about me. There you go. Just go to Inferno Studios. That's my .com. That's my own line of stuff. There's links and stuff in there. But I'm mostly on Facebook, and then just do a search for Florimonte, FLORIMONTE. You'll find me.
And here on Sunday nights.
Yeah, here on Sunday nights, exactly.
Mackenzie, where can people find you online?
Oh gosh, they can find me on Facebook at Mackenzie Wortman and on Instagram and Twitter at Wortman25.
And I'm sure when they find you, they'll see lots of dinosaurs. And we'll get you back on when we're going to question you about all the dinosaurs, Mackenzie.
Okay, I'm sure you can see Raven behind me. She's
Yeah.
she's
lot of
at the
dinosaur
doctor's
paintings
right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roberta, how about you? Where can folks find you on the interwebs?
Hi, you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram under Roby Conroy, and you're on Silverline Sunday.
That's right. And Curtis, what about you? Where can folks find you online?
Sure. So I have two things. I have my martial arts school that now teaches online classes, and then I have my comic book that I'm working on. So for the martial arts school, and all the social media is up there for it, it's tigercrane.net. And for my comic book, we call it Shadow Ghost, the Kung Fu comic by a Kung Fu master. That's www.theshadowghost.com. So you can find me there.
Is your class still?
Curtis, I got to tell you, I got to tell you the respect I have for you staying with the martial arts and with the Kung Fu for all these years since we first met. You were thinking about it, and I got to tell you, you got my respect, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, well, that means the world to me because you're one of the very first martial artists I talked to about it. So I appreciate it.
You got it, though.
You
all right,
made Curtis's year. Jerry, you hide from people
Tommy,
online.
Mackenzie, Curtis, Roberta, Roland. Thank you guys.
Absolutely,
You guys,
Jerry. It's been a lot of fun.
It wasn't as painful as I thought it would be.
Good. I didn't think it would be. So when I send you an email and ask you back, you won't be so hesitant, right?
Try to find me.
Well, that is of course my question for you, Jerry, because you hide out from online. If people want to find you, where can they go? You got a website.
Well, my website's jerrybingham.com. Real easy to figure out.
All right, very cool. And I know because you and I have swapped some emails that you haven't been in the convention scene for a while, but I think you're lining up a few, right?
What's that? Yeah, I'm just now.
You can announce yet?
It's been probably 10 years or more since I've been to a comic book convention. So this year somebody talked me into it. So
are there any you can announce yet?
Well, I'm not going to say anything. I have an agent who's working it out.
Okay.
For me, so.
All right. Well, once you can announce something, we'll be happy to get those announced for you as well. And I am Roland. You can find me on you can find me all over the social medias. Just look for Roland Man or Manrolla. And if you've seen us at all, you know what we do here at the end of our show. We'd like to tell you, don't forget, thanks to Daytona Beach Comic Con for being our sponsor. Thanks to Orlando Collector Deviants. Shout out to Kablam and to Coliseum of Comics. Don't forget, we have a Tuesday show. Be here, check out those guys. That Tuesday, that Silverline show on Tuesday, and then be back here Wednesday for the Whammers. But until then, remember to
Silverline. Hi, I'm Greg Horn. Make mine Silverline.